welcome to the regular council meeting for May the 4th. I would like to call the meeting to order. Introduction of late items. Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Worship. We have two new delegations to add under liquor license application 111, which is for 241 Skinner Street. First delegation, Ms. Darcy Olson. The second is Mr. Bobier.
Thank you very much. Worship. Can I have a motion for the adoption of the agenda as amended?
So moved.
So moved and seconded. Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Motion for the adoption of the minutes.
So moved.
Second by Councillor Fuller. Thank you. All those, no discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Presentations none. Mayor's report none. And next item is corporate services. Before we get into corporate services, I'd like to just touch on Mayor's report. Mr. Stearman, I have to ask you to keep your sign down in the course of the meeting, if you would, please. Thank you. Not only council, but people in the gallery find it very distracting and intimidating. If you would, please. Thank you. Corporate services, One Port Drive, former CPR ferry dock. There's a motion or a recommendation on page 17. That council received for information a report pertaining to the former CPR ferry dock demolition tender. Can I have a motion to get on the floor, please? Seconded. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. Councillor Fuller. Discussion. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question to staff. According to the map on page 19, it looks like Seaspan owns this dock, just confirming that they own it and we're removing it at our cost?
Go ahead.
That is correct. It is an improvement on the property. That is the responsibility of Seaspans. And before it's removed, we'll make sure that we first have Seaspan's approval, but more importantly, make sure that it would be counted towards any future acquisition. So it would come off the gross value of the property.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Kipp.
No, is this, it's also been identified that this is now a good site if the fast ferry comes through. Is that one of the reasons that this is being cleaned up too? I mean, it's an optimum site. I always wonder why we sometimes absorb the cost in that, but to hear it coming off of the eventual cost, it'll be, it satisfies my need in that one.
Thank you. Councillor Yoakum.
Thank you. Thank you, Worship. Just some comments and a question around this the site, and this was purchased before this council, so I'm playing catching up to speed. So I was just some concerns I would have around the site. Is this known as this is the Wellcock site?
Yes.
So I have some concerns around in the future. I understand council's formalized the budget to remove the docks. If I'm correct, I believe I'm accurate there. So I'm just a little concerned in the future of not doing the work as such until we have some customers per se, as we're putting a cart ahead of the horse here of doing work with no one really lined up to really be there, from my understanding. And I also have concerns around the middens that were earlier at the pallet site. Who's to say there won't be more middens around? And also the contamination, I read in one report. So I would, before we start spending money, well, we are, in my view, unfortunately, I'd like us to do some homework before we start putting too much money forward on the site, because I think this could be a site where the dollars could add up in a hurry, just from the couple items I did mention. So I just want to put that out there to do our homework and make sure we're cautious, because I'm a little leery. I got a lot of concerns on the site. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Thank you. Mm-hmm. No other speakers? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Next item. Access options for Lindley Valley West, Lindley Valley Drive. To be introduced by Mr. Lindsay, Director of Community Development.
Thank you, Your Worship. We just have a brief presentation that I believe is just coming up on your screen there. Mr. Foy, who's your transportation manager, is with me this evening. We just have a few slides that we'd like to walk through. Certainly I understand that the majority of council understand this project, but I think it's worth talking a little bit about some background, some historical context, why we're here talking about this issue, what's currently going on in Lindley Valley West, and what sort of direction we're looking for from council. So as I mentioned, just have 2 or 3 slides to go through to help tell this story. Where I want to start first is sort of this background, this historical context, which I think is important to understand, is for many years, in fact, decades now, the city's had in its policy work and in its planning documents this idea that there'd be a major east-west connector that you'd be able to find your way all the way from the Island Highway in the west and through the entire valley and emerge out the other end on Hammond Bay Road. And the idea was that you'd have this significant east-west connector that would probably be 4 lanes across that would accommodate not only all of the development existing outside the periphery of the valley, but all of the development that at that time was contemplated to occur within Lindley Valley itself. That started to change in 2003. So in 2003, the city purchased, you can see it probably on this next slide, the city purchased the land outside of the polygon in red here, known as Cotta Lake Park. So at that time, this road, which could have been upwards of a 6-kilometer road, was then reduced to a maximum of 4 kilometers. We knew at that point that this Lindley Valley Drive would never probably go any further than some sort of connection that would take you down to Rock City Road. Fast forward into last year, the city then purchased all of the lands that are inside of that red polygon there as parkland for Lindley Valley. And that was certainly a significant investment by the community, but had real implications for the transportation network. And we knew at that time that now this road that went from 6 kilometers down to 4 kilometers would never be more than a 2-kilometer road that really went from being this major transportation link east-west through the valley to really just providing access to the development in Lindley Valley West itself. And I just also want to take a brief minute to talk about what's occurring in the valley now. As council is aware, there's sort of 2 major developments that are happening. There's 5300 Rutherford Road. This actually had its planning started back in 2008, so it's been in the works for a number of years. And that development will have 207 units at build-out. There's another property, 5701 Vandernook, which is the property to the east here, or on the right side of the image. At build-out, it'll have 353 units. So in the total of these 2 developments, we're looking at about 560 units being placed in the valley. At the time when these properties were put in place, it's important to remember that the official community plan, all of our planning documents still envisioned that there'd be this major east-west connector. As I mentioned, the first plan was done in 2008, certainly well before any of the acquisition was ever contemplated in Lindley Valley West, at a time when we still thought there'd be a major intersection on Rutherford and that this road would allow for not only access through these developments, but all of the lands that would yet to develop in the valley. So as you can see there, the whole plan has been laid out around this Lindley Valley Drive, this idea that would extend on the area that's dashed in red, that would ultimately connect with Rutherford, and that through that Lindley Valley Drive, you'd be able to get from any of these developments out to Rutherford and then make your way north or south through the community. At the time that the subdivision was done for these lands, it was noted that if that road, the road I talked about dashed in red there, was not yet completed, that there needed to be some form of accommodation for the additional traffic that was going to be generated. So the traffic study noted that once you hit a certain phase in both of those developments, and it happens to be just after 200 units, there needs to be some sort of interim improvements that are done if that road's not yet connected. So the interim options that were identified at that time were to either, 1, put a temporary road, which is dashed in green here, which would be north of the existing trail, if you can picture along McGregor Creek. Or the second option was to run up through the existing neighborhood of Alta Vista, Cascara, up to Vandernook, out to a new signalized intersection on Rutherford Road. So the 2 options, again, go through the area in green, or basically put a new signal up at Vandernook and Rutherford Road. And it's probably important when we're on this slide just to remind everyone that unless council directs otherwise, this remains the status quo. This remains the plan we're working under today. Our official community plan, our transportation plan still identify that this connection is to be made. And we still have these 2 options to deal with development in case the developments get to a point where this road has not been built, but they're proceed beyond the magic 200 units I spoke of. Early last year, in recognition of some of this work that was going on in the background, in recognition of the park acquisition and how this road network has really evolved, and some of the work that was occurring on the other side of Rutherford in behind Oliver Woods, Council asked us to go back and look at the Lindley Valley Road and look at the potential role that it could play in a transportation network. So we're here this evening to talk a little bit about the options, but more importantly to get some direction from Council on how next to proceed. And I'm going to turn over to Mr. Foy now to talk to you about some of the options that were identified by staff through this review.
So, just following up from Council's direction early last year, staff looked at 4 different options to gain access into the Lindley Valley West area. Just starting with option A, which is the traditional option that's enshrined within the OCP and the Transportation Master Plan and is currently the default option. It still provides the sort of best possible access to the area. The majority of trips to and from the neighborhood are expected to travel to and from the south. And as it is generally sort of pivoted from the south, it provides good access out to Rutherford and in the correct direction. The challenge with this option is it's expensive relative to the other options. And well, historically, that expense was likely supportable because of the much larger scale of development proposed throughout the Lindley Valley corridor out to Cottle Lake Park, or the original boundaries. Now, with the revised land use scenarios that we're looking at, it may not be as supportable as it was previously. Option B was identified sort of through this process as an alternative. It's a little bit to the north. It will require some reworking of development plans. And basically will connect the end of the existing constructed piece of Lindley Valley Drive out to Rutherford Road at a signalized intersection across from Nelson Road. Option C, the third option, is very similar to option B, but oriented slightly to the north. It was one of the options that was identified in the original subdivision plan as a temporary access, but in this case is being presented as a permanent access, connecting Lindley Valley Drive to Rutherford Road, again with signalized intersection just to the north of McGregor Creek. And then the final option presented is option D, which would make use of the existing Alta Vista and Cascara Drive to access out to Rutherford Road with a signalized intersection. It is the least costly option, but it has the sort of largest neighborhood impacts, and it is the most circuitous access route for the neighborhood. So that sort of gives a real brief summary of the options that are available, or at least that we've investigated up to this point.
So, Your Worship, I'm certainly happy to take any questions from Council.
Thank you. Councillor Kipp.
Thank you. Through to staff. The connection to Glenmore, where the condominiums are now kind of being cleared in that, which will be to the right side of the screen in the pink area, when is that slated to connect through to, I think it's actually to Brookwood eventually? When would that be?
Yeah, it's in a future phase of the development, and that's really under the control of the developer. I would estimate on the current pace of development that you're still looking at probably 1 to 2 years.
Before that area is developed?
Before it's connected, yes.
And a further follow-up on that, how many residential lots have been removed from that road connection, option A or option D? How many units have been removed with the purchase of Lindley Valley? Development units that would have drained onto that road. So what I'm saying is, if you go to page 48 on ours, or the one with the showing the 2000 and that, the big green part that one. So the red dotted area was slated for development, and that road, which you see on the blue dots and the main blue line, it was slated to carry all of that traffic. So it was some 600 units or more?
That's a fairly good estimate, Your Worship. There's not, of course, been detailed planning in there. There's certainly a lot of topographical and watercourse constraints that would have limited development potential. Off the top of my head, I would have guessed we'd be looking at something similar to what we see in Lindley Valley West, so I would have said sort of that 400 to 600 unit range, yes.
Okay, so that has been reduced for that road. Thank you very much.
Councillor Yocum.
Thank you, Your Worship. As we discuss and debate, or I don't know if we're going to debate, but this conversation on the road access in Lindley Valley, I'm not sure if it's appropriate, but out of process of elimination, I'd be more comfortable. I don't like making a motion without sharing with council. Sorry about that, guys and ladies. But definitely eliminate option C. If option C is the one that's beside the marsh, the wetlands, I would like, not saying we're not going to have a conversation, but I would right now like them to take option C off the table. I don't know if that's appropriate, though. I'd like to make that motion
You would like to make that motion?
to take option C off out of any of the options.
You second that motion?
Yeah, I'd second that. I'd like to talk about that.
Okay, so get it on the floor, and then we'll take it from there. So Councillor Kipp is seconding that, and now for discussion. Councillor Kipp.
Well, yeah, from my perspective, that area, it's option C, goes right between the road and the wetland would be a trailway on the other side of the road, and where it comes out on Lindley Valley or on Rutherford Road, I just don't like that connection. I know we had a lot of public concern with it, the way it's been designed, and I'm quite happy to remove option C from the table. I know I'd never vote for it in my term, so it's happy to get rid of that one for me.
Councillor Pratt.
Thank you. In option C, just a question through Your Worship to the staff. Option C would include both the road and the path? Or the road would take the place of the path?
Our expectation is that we'd be able to fit the road to the north of the path.
Okay.
But it would be, you're constrained by space there. You've got some big rock features to the north, and you get closer to adjacent properties. And to the south, you have the trail, and you also have poorer soil conditions. So, if we were going into detailed design, we would have to sort of find an alignment that balanced those. We'd also try to narrow up the cross-section to the degree we could, likely by stripping, we would have no on-street parking. We would likely be able to remove sidewalk from both sides where we have the trail present, and then perhaps just on one side where the trail deviated from the alignment. So we'd be working to try to minimize those impacts.
Thank you. I do know that there is a great deal of public concern over option C. And I certainly would be open to thinking about taking that off the table. I would like to hear the rest of the discussion before I make any decision about that. But I do know that before, what we were going to do is take out the path and put a road in there, I think. Or at least that was what everybody thought was going to happen. Now we're talking about a path and a road. Changes the concerns slightly, I'm sure. But that area, when I walked through that area myself, that area is very park-like, and it creates a little bit of a park area in that area, and a road going through with it could certainly upset a lot of wildlife and so on in that area too, I would think. Those would be my concerns.
Mr. Swaby.
Your Worship, if Council does proceed and remove option C as a permanent option, staff would also recommend that you direct us not to allow it as an interim access, as it's currently written in the development agreements with the owners of the property.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I would support the motion. That's certainly not an option that I find very palatable. My question was going to be through you to staff, which Mr. Swaby just answered, the concern about having that still as a possible temporary measure, and I'd like to see that off the table as well. As we reduce our options, I would further to the motion, and it could be a separate motion afterwards, like to see personally public input on the other options conducted by staff, and have staff come back with a recommendation based on what they hear and what they judge to be best of the remaining options. but I will support the motion on the floor.
Thank you. Councillor Fuller.
Yeah, I notice on page 53, which it shows that part of the property without the option C diagram in it. There's a bit of a pink development part. Would that portion then be able to be subdivided into lots for building if we remove option C?
So what you're saying, if I'm looking at that, comparing it to what's on the screen right now, just under the block where it says option 3, that's actually hiding that little pink area you're referring to?
Yes, yeah. It's hiding a fair bit of the pink area that I'm referring
Mr.
to.
Lindsay?
Sorry, Your Worship, I understand what you're asking. Sir, under the existing development permit, those lands are intended to be dedicated as park with the future phase of the subdivision.
Okay, that would be good then. Yeah, I've walked that area before, a long time ago, before any of the development was in there, and it would be sad to see it turned into a roadway.
Councillor, thank you. Councillor Hong.
Thank you, Your Worship. Two things I would support taking out option C as well, but a question to staff with regards to phase 2. If we're going to take this for public input, is that going to be discussed as well, or is phase 2, what we describe on page 52 and 53, kind of out of the question now that we aren't going to be doing too much in that area?
I would say at the direction of council, if phase 2 is part of the public consultation that council would like us to pursue.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious, since we're not doing the entire connector, if phase 2 was worth doing it at this point. Okay, thank you.
Your Worship, I might just add, I was just trying to understand a little bit about what you were talking about. Those are two distinctly different kinds of consultations, I think, that you may mix up kind of the input. I think it's very needed and very valuable. And we would have to think about how we did that to ensure that we weren't bringing forward mixed messages to you about the neighborhood's concerns.
Okay, great, thank you.
Councillor Fuller.
Yeah, that looks like a part of option A, and then phase 2 would be a second part of option A. And I think if this motion passes, I'd be perfectly willing to make a motion to eliminate option A, which means it would be less likely that we would have to enter into phase 2 with the other bit of Lindley Valley Road drive out to Rutherford. So.
Okay. No other speakers? I just wanted to say that I'm going to vote against. I'm going to be voting against this simply because I would like to go option 2 and review all alternate processes, but that's just me. So, call the question. All those in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion carries. Councillor Fuller. Councillor Fuller, you were going to bring another motion forward.
Oh, sure. Yeah, sure. Yeah, I didn't think you were going to jump on it that quickly, but yeah, I would like to make a motion to remove option A from the options that we're looking at tonight.
Okay. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Hong, seconded by Councillor Hong. All right, so we've got a motion on the floor. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would have to vote against this motion simply because I feel we're now starting to really narrow down our options very quickly, and without a little bit more information. I would prefer, as I indicated earlier, at this point, to have staff come back with recommended option or options after some public and stakeholder consultation. Personally, there's one of the other options that I would like to see off the table as well, but I would hesitate to do that at this point. We're going to need to choose one of these options. So before we eliminate any more, I would like to see, as I've said, some consultation and some recommendations.
Okay. Councillor Pratt.
I totally agree with that. I think that we do need to go to some form of public consultation on this. This is a very important piece for this area, for the people who are living there, the expectations that they've had. I really think it's important that we do that consultation piece, so I won't be voting in favor of removing option A.
Thank you. Councillor Hong.
Thank you. The reason I support the motion is because looking at the projection cost on page 59, we're at $5.6 million to do that little piece of road, which I feel it's a little excessive where the other options are cheaper. I would also like to add, if there was another option, either in a combination of whatever we have left with C and D, the Glenmore connector that Councillor Kipp mentioned. How do we add that into the discussion?
Well, you've got a motion on the table, so you can bring that one up in a similar fashion.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Yocum.
Thank you. I was just going to ask I don't know if what Councillor Kipp and Councillor Hong are referring to, are they referring to the road that's already carved in with services, etc., but just not complete? Is that what we're referring to? For the option that hasn't been presented yet? That's for my own clarity.
Option A is the one that was originally part of the overall plan. So now they're suggesting that we take it off the table as well, and presumably for cost reasons.
Okay. I'll just wait till the conversation comes to that carved-in part. Thank you.
Councillor Fuller.
Yeah, I look at it from two aspects: cost reasons for the first phase of option A, and the environmental reasons for the phase 2, which would attach to phase 1 of option A, which is also a significant cost as well. So I'm looking at it from two aspects, and protecting that pond area and park that's over there as well.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I'm certainly aware of the cost factor, and that is a consideration, absolutely. But it's one consideration, and it has to be weighed against other considerations, such as leaving ourselves with an option which is very circuitous and I don't think solves the problem or the potential problem. So again, I would just like to hold off on eliminating any more options at this point until we get a full report, maybe with a little bit more information, and make a decision at that point.
Thank you. Councillor Pratt.
I completely agree with that. I really do feel that that we're really narrowing down our options at this point to, if this motion goes through, to option B and option D. And I do not agree with option D. I think that's a disservice to this area to expect everybody to file out through there in a neighborhood where there's a lot of children and people living, families living. They weren't expecting that to be the connector out of that subdivision. So, and I don't think the developers were either. So I would not vote to eliminate that option for that reason.
Thank you. Councillor Yocum, did you want to add to it at the end of the conversation?
Not right now.
Okay, thank you. So, no more further speakers. All those in favor of the motion to remove option A? Opposed? Motion carries. Mayor McKay, Councillor Pratt, Councillor Thorpe, opposed. Okay, go ahead. Thank you. Councillor Hong, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Can I actually make a motion to add option E in conjunction with option B and D, where Glenmore road access is to be opened and discussed with the community in these discussions as well? Thank you.
Second. To add that to the public debate.
Yes.
Okay. Can you read back the motion, Mr.?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to clarify, you said to create a new option that combines options. Can you repeat those two, please?
At this point, I guess the only options we have is B and D.
B and D.
Yeah.
And Your Worship, the point about undertaking public consultation, is that part of this motion or a separate motion? I didn't catch that.
I think it's part of the motion. This
Part of
is,
this
we're going to
motion?
bring this, yeah, to public consultation, right? I would just like,
So if I could repeat back, then what I understand is to add a new option to combine option B and D, and also that council directs staff to undertake a public and stakeholder consultation on access options for Lindley Valley West, and return to council with recommended options to advance design and costing for Lindley Valley Drive and Lindley Valley West to Rutherford Road,
Thank you.
including Glenmore.
including Glenmore. Okay.
A southerly access through Glenmore. Councillor Yocum.
Thank you, Worship. So we're down to option B and D, if those are in favor of option B, because we're still looking at over, in the interim, 3 million, which we know would grow a bit. So are we, I don't even know, like, right now I'm not in favor of B, I'm just one vote here. I will be voting option D with also the amended version of where it's already carved out and the services are already in place. And the debate would be about families, emergency response vehicles, etc. I've timed my drive from there to there. It was well within the expected emergency response from the bottom of that blue dotted area. And also, as a Cinnabar Valley resident, it's very similar, sort of, with driving down the bottom of the valley, etc. And Cinnabar as well has many families and children, and it copes and manages. So I just want to share those perspectives as well. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Pratt.
Thank you. I am in favor of public consultation, and I am in favor of doing DB or the Glenmore, adding another option going through the other subdivision. I think that other subdivision is going to have the same problems as option D does, but I really would like to hear what the public has to say about it. So I will support that motion.
Thank you. Councillor Fuller.
Yeah, I think I'm a bit confused about the whole motion because when I look at the maps and where Glenmore ends is almost at a water course right there or into an existing development near Fairbrook Crescent, and where option B ends is on Lindley Valley Drive, and then there's another smaller road. So how those would connect, I really don't know. I could see Glenmore in concert with option D, but how it would fit in with option B, I just can't figure it out. So I definitely do support Glenmore access opened to be discussed with the public.
Okay, so we've got the motion to have B, D, and the new E, which is Glenmore, on the table. So, Mr. Swaby.
I'm
curious.
Your Worship, please vote on the motion, and then I have some further work that I'll need you to consider with this.
Okay, thank you. So, seeing no further speakers, I call the question. All those in favor? Oh, sure, certainly. Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is what I have. To that council move and second to add a new option E in addition to options B and D, and that staff are directed to undertake a public and stakeholder consultation on access options for Lindley Valley West, Lindley Valley Drive, and return to council with recommended options to advance design and costing for Lindley Valley Drive from Lindley Valley West to Rutherford Road, and include southerly access to Glenmore.
Can you reread the first part?
The very first part. To add a new option E as well as option B and D, or is it in combination with?
In combination, so I'd actually like to add option E in a combination with B and D.
Okay, that's what I originally, okay.
Thank you. And public consultation. Thank you. Seeing no further speakers, I call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Swaby.
So, Your Worship, could I have a further direction for option A to direct staff to remove it from the official community plan as the connector as part of the major road network?
Certainly. Councillor Yocum moving, Councillor Fuller seconding.
And Your Worship, that would come forward by way of a bylaw, and council would pass the bylaw to remove it.
The bylaw at another date.
Yes.
Certainly, thank
Just a
you.
motion to bring it forward.
So we have a motion on the floor. Seeing no speakers, I call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
So, Your Worship, the second part is that as part of that report, we'll comment on Phase 2 and provide council some understanding of the importance or lack of importance of Phase 2, and you can make decisions at that time as well. I would point out, just get council thinking about this, option B requires a land purchase, as you are quite aware. So you could right now direct us to go out and secure that option, or just wait until you get the public input, but you can understand the awkwardness that this creates as we go to the stakeholders.
Do we want to give instruction to staff to secure an option for B? Councillor Thorpe.
Yes, I'll make that motion, Your Honor.
Okay. Seconder?
I'll second it.
Seconded. Thank you. Seeing no speakers, I call the...
I'd like to ask a question about that.
Councillor Hong.
Thank you. Through to staff. So now the landowner at this meeting, we're discussing buying the property, if anything, or whatever we're going to do, or expropriate, or whatever we have to do. Does that up our costs of associating with this, contingent on what your estimations would be?
Your Worship, knowing that we're on camera, I can tell you that we do not pay more than the assessed value of the properties, and that we'll negotiate in the best interest of the taxpayers to ensure that we get the lowest price possible.
And if they don't agree?
At this point, it would just be an option subject to council approving it. It would just secure it as we went out to the public process to ensure that there was actually an option there to talk to the public about.
Is there an option for us to see if the public is actually even interested in this, or if D is an option to throw out in public? Like, can we come back?
Just, Your Worship, the more that we talk about this in public, the less of an opportunity for me to purchase this at market rates.
Thank you. Councillor Fuller.
Actually, my questions were answered by Mr. Swaby's comments.
Thank you. So, call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Yocum, Councillor Hong opposed. Motion carries. Next item, liquor license application number LA111, application for a permanent change to a liquor license primary license, 241 Skinner Street, known as Club 241.
Your Worship?
Yes.
Sorry about that. I have a conflict of interest on this topic because I actually own 2 bars in the downtown area that would conflict with me, so I would like to step out, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Will the clerk make a notation that Councillor Hong is conflicting himself? Thank you. So we have 2 delegations. The first one is Ms. Darcy Olson. If you would, please. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Darcy Olson, 435 Howard Avenue, Nanaimo. I'm here to represent the applicant of Club 241 for an increase in their licensed seating inside a fully renovated establishment. Let me start by saying Club 241 appreciates and respects the hard work and continuous support of the RCMP. As recognized in the report to Council and Attachment D from the RCMP, Club 241 has an active, strong supporter and member of Bar Watch, the program, since 2007. The owner has seen the results and respects the value of Bar Watch. He will continue the same practices and controls as he has in the past. Mr. Bill Carter, who's the Chair in Safety Security Committee for Downtown, says the owner is fully engaged in a Nanaimo Bar Watch Committee member, supporting the RCMP and other safety measures as issues arise. 6 months ago, the owner started the process of upgrading and reinvesting $500,000 into Club 241 and the Nanaimo tourism nightlife. The renovation has increased employment through construction and in our community, and will also continue to do so once Club 241 opens. With the changes and the increase to the floor plan, Club 241's occupancy load has been increased by 27 seats. Through the application process with the City, Club 241's licensee holder was requested through discussions with the RCMP and the local liquor inspector and City staff to sign a voluntary letter attaching certain new terms and conditions to his liquor primary license. Such a letter should be regulated through the BCLC and attached to every liquor primary license owner, and not amending individual licenses, placing the license holder in an unfair opportunity and creates an environment of unfair competition. The primary focus to date, as we have been informed, have been liquor primary licenses based in the downtown. Club 2 for One has asked the liquor inspector for written information and data of the successes of the other municipalities mentioned that are participating. As of our last meeting, he said there were none. Without such pertinent data as to how many bars are actively participating versus how many have declined, and a progress report creates an untested environment of experimenting with an individual liquor primary owner's license. So after receiving legal advice, Club 2 for One was informed not to sign, and was also informed amending the voluntary terms and conditions to the license does not assist the RCMP providing with greater authority within the establishment. For these reasons, the owner has decided not to sign the voluntary terms and conditions requested. He will continue practices with Bar Watch and the committee, and to continue to assist the RCMP in matters of concern. In closing, Club 2 for One does not feel that if Council were to opt out of commenting, that it would slow our application process. The owner has Mr. Ted Beaubier, present tonight as legal counsel for Club 2 for One. He's also here to assist me with any legal questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see any speakers or any questions for you. Thank you very much. Receive the delegation. So moved. Seconder. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Next delegation, Mr. Ted Beaubier. Thank you, sir. Name and address for the record, please.
Beaubier, B-E-A-U-B-I-E-R, Ted, and I reside at Yellow Point Road, 3540 Yellow Point Road. And Mr. Manhouse has asked me to come and speak with respect to this application. And from my perspective, I don't know how much time you've had to look at the materials that have been supplied by staff or the suggested terms and conditions. But the suggested terms and conditions are actually, it's a legal term. So when the term or expression terms and conditions is used, it has significant legal meaning, meaning that the RCMP and or the Liquor Control and Licensing Board can prosecute or charge offenses and or mark up breaches of the terms of the license. Now, when a terms and conditions is added to a license, it has, again, legal meaning and significant legal meaning. There are 33 separate conditions that are suggested in this on the suggested terms and conditions. Those terms and conditions would attach to Mr. Manhouse's license. Now, from my point of view, this is something that should be a bottom-down requirement. In other words, the Attorney General's Department and/or the General Manager of the Liquor Control and Licensing Board, they should have be addressing this issue from the top, not from the bottom. It's a complicated area where you'll look at the details of the terms and conditions that they're suggesting, and I'll take you to those in a few minutes. But they are micromanaging the operation of the bar, putting the operator at severe risk in terms of infractions. In addition to that, the implementation of some of those terms and conditions that they're suggesting would be almost impossible for the bar manager or Mr. Manhouse to implement. As an example, in one of the terms and conditions, it requires that the bar or the owner, the licensee, maintain or secure a crime scene, to collect evidence, to take statements. That's the job of the RCMP. There's also a requirement in there that they note and take note of gangs. And now there's no definition of the word gang, so we don't know what is a gang or what isn't a gang. They are required to not only bar persons who are wearing gang jackets, but have gang tattoos, have gang paraphernalia without any definition of what that means. So it puts the operator or the owner in an impossible situation and at risk, meaning for a wrongful, not prosecution, but breach of the license. So another point I wish to make on this is that by selectively approaching bar owners, in this case it happens to be Mr. Manhouse, and he's brought to the table because he wants to make an amendment to his license, increasing it 10%, 28 spaces. So this is an opportunity for the RCMP, and this is not a comment to the RCMP. Mr. Manhouse, as you've heard in the previous, Ms. Darcy, is fully cooperative with the RCMP at all times. He has in his place the Scan Watch, which is connected to anyone else who has that system of scanning identification to mark offenders or people who are troublemakers or gang members for that matter, as best he can recall, as he can identify them. He attends regularly all of the meetings that they have on the Bar Watch program. He signed the neighborhood agreement, which puts his business license at risk if he breaches the terms of that. One of the other items that is suggested as a term and condition is a metal detector, so that if the person goes through there, now they have to scan for weapons. This is on a liquor primary license. It's not applicable throughout the province. It's not applicable to other liquor primary license in this city. The RCMP have indicated in the report that prepared by council that for council that there is an increase in gang activity. That is not evidenced in Mr. Manhouse's operation. It's anecdotal evidence, and it's not, in my view, supported by the evidence. So if you take a look at your report to council, you will see in that report, Appendix A, they have a requirement under video surveillance. Now these are not bad things in the sense that these are items which the police would like to have or take care or to be control of, but this is a business they're operating. This is not the police they're well trained to gather evidence with respect to breaches of the criminal code. But video surveillance, the licensed video must have a check ID at all times and produce surveillance equipment. Well, Mr. Manhouse has that in his establishment. He does that and provides it to the RCMP if requested. Identification verification. Licensee must use electronic scanning equipment. Now, that's not a requirement with respect to the legislation under the Liquor Control and Licensing Act. But he does that voluntarily. Patrons, there we say in some C, licensee must install, maintain the industry standard operational electronic weapons detection system. There's no definition of what the electronic system standard is, or industry standard is. In that same clause, all patrons of the establishment must be screened for weapons upon entry or re-entry into the establishment. Mandatory searches of all bags and packs. Mr. Manhouse does that already. This is the part that gets somewhat difficult and problematic, I submit. Licensees must ensure that no patrons or employees with any apparel or jewelry of any kind with gang affiliate identification, where a person or employee or patron or entertainer who removes a garment inside the establishment reveals any gang affiliate identification or support for any gang or gang activities. These are broadly worded definitions. They become part of the licensing agreement, part of what Mr. Manhouse must enforce, including tattoos of all types. Now, what does that do to the owner of the bar? Does he have to become familiar with all of the tattoos that might be applicable with respect to gangs? It's an impossible situation with respect to enforcement. Updated training manual included. So when it's safe and appropriate to hold an individual who has committed a violent and serious offense. Well, now we're getting into criminal code definitions of arrest and protection of crime scenes. Responsibilities for serving staff to unruly behavior, proper use and documentation. Well, up-training and maintaining manuals, does that now include all of them becoming familiar with the constantly changing gang affiliations, which is not a problem in Mr. Manhouse's establishment. Entertainers in the bar must not wear apparel or articles that display gang affiliations. Signs must be posted. No gang identifiers of any kind or tattoos or jewelry are allowed. Now, Mr. Manhouse does have a sign with respect to that. So my point being on all of this is that these are attached to the license. Now, it isn't as though the attachment to the license, when you have a license, it's really a one-page document. And it's got, and Mr. Manhouse has got two conditions on that license. One is the hours, if I recall correctly, and the second is the seating capacity. Well, now that is not much of a problem, but in fact, this document here, it's called a Liquor Primary Terms and Conditions document, and you can see the number of pages that are in here. This document and all the contents of it are actually attached to Mr. Manhouse's or anyone else who's got a liquor primary license. So when you have a liquor and primary license, you're bound under the terms and conditions of this document. Now, the point I bring that to your attention is that these licenses are always reviewed constantly by the Liquor Control and Licensing Branch in Victoria. Now, these terms and conditions, the RCMP or perhaps some of the local licensing inspectors have lobbied on a number of occasions to the Liquor Control and Licensing Branch for terms and conditions that are similar to the ones that are being put before Mr. Manhouse now. They have been turned down. Now, I suggest that there's a reason for that, and that's because probably most of those conditions are not enforceable in the sense that they're breached the Charter of Rights, or they haven't been worked out the language properly, or they haven't worked out the enforcement properly. Either way, the branch has not approved those terms and conditions as presented here. So what's that mean? Well, it means that it's not being approved from the top down is where this legislation should happen, not from the bottom up and brought to a local council here, where they look at this and say, well, you know, what do we do with this? It's not relevant with respect to, it's relevant in the sense of keeping peace and good order, but it's not relevant with respect to this application to increase the seats from 10%. And it lends itself for mischief, quite frankly, because you can get a situation where the RCMP try to pick off individual licensees with respect to, okay, if you want to increase your seating capacity, you're going to have to sign these documentations, or we're going to oppose it, or we're going to suggest to council that they not approve it. So now you're in a position where it's not really the terms of the license or the terms of what's going on in the bar. It's getting that another set of terms and conditions that they wish attached to a license. You could get a situation where a bar manager might be facing a suspension of some kind, say a month suspension, and the liquor inspector and/or the RCMP say, well, you know what? If you sign these terms and conditions, we'll approve we will waive or we won't proceed with the suspensions that you are currently facing. So those are all various reasons that I would submit on behalf of Mr. Manhouse that the council do not approve the attachment of these terms and conditions to Mr. Manhouse's application, or simply opt out and make no decision and leave it for Victoria to deal with as where it should properly be dealt with, and not at this level. And I think, again, in closing, I think that it should be top down, not bottom up.
Thank you. We have one question for you. Councillor Yoakum.
Thank you, Worship. Actually, I'm sort of perplexed, but since I'm on the bottom feeder group, I'll fight through this here. So the request is a occupancy to add more seats, which I have no concern with, no issue at all.
That's correct.
No, okay. So thank you. Because you're 25 or 27 seats.
28, I believe.
28. Okay. So, but where I'm confused is the licensing component. I mean, the terms and conditions here on the attachment C. So the question I would have is, before you applied for this increase in seats, are there only terms and conditions that the two you just stated about to the present day terms, what are they?
Okay, so now.
Because there must be some in place.
There are two, this is the license here, all right?
Yeah, what's the terms?
So the terms and conditions are, one, the opening hours from 7 o'clock in the PM to, on a Monday to 2 a.m., and it goes on and lists the time. Two, the capacity of 244 seats. Now, that's not the end of the terms and conditions. That's what's on this license.
Yeah.
The terms and conditions, in addition to those two conditions, are in the liquor primary and terms and conditions.
In the present day license.
In the present day license.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Yeah.
So all of these various terms and conditions are here. And they do have things like compliance meetings. There's a number of enforcement provisions in here that cover that license.
Okay, so to wrap up my question, I guess let's get to my question, is so tonight, like, what's our authority, like, do we have, like I stated, I have no issue with the 27 seats. Okay. What can my vote do here with the terms and conditions? Like, who do you go and negotiate with, the province? Like, who's that up to?
No, I'm sorry, I'm not quite getting your question.
I'm not sure actually what you're asking. Let me refer.
Okay. So what we're asking, you have an application here by Mr. Manhouse to increase the seating.
Absolutely.
And then, so council or the staff has said, we are suggesting you and be in support of that if Mr. Manhouse signs the terms and conditions that we have now placed before the council. Which, if you do that, that then makes the license, adds to his license the terms and conditions that I referred to earlier.
So is there space for your party to talk to the city staff and have a reasonable conversation, saying, well, here's what's in place today, we're adding just 25 seats,
right.
Let's have a conversation. Has that happened, or is there space for that?
That's happened.
Okay.
Okay. Perhaps what we can do is we can have Mr. Swaby explain,
Okay. Thank you.
What the ramifications of the vote are, certainly. Councillor Fuller, is it for the delegation?
No, not so much for the delegation.
Any questions for the delegation? Seeing none, call for receipt of the delegation.
So moved.
So moved. Second? Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Swaby, I know it's a complicated the way this is worded.
So, Your Worship, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Lindsay, but before I do so, I just want Council to be aware of your options as well, that, of course, you can refer this back if you believe that there's still a conversation you'd like us to have with the applicant. I heard lots of statements tonight from the delegations about they didn't understand some of the issues that we were portraying about gangs and how you'd identify. So we could have that conversation and then bring it back. We also can talk about the rights that we have as a local government to enforce some of these issues. But I'll turn it over to Mr. Lindsay and he can brief you on the proposal.
Thank you.
So maybe, Your Worship, to start with the more general terms, just to clarify, it's the province that ultimately makes the decision on liquor license amendments, or in this case, an expansion to the capacity. Through that process, they send it to the local government. They've sent it to Nanaimo for a comment on this. At that time, they put some guidelines in place about how we do that review, what we look at, the impact on the surrounding community, the impact on our policing, for example. And then it's up to council to make a recommendation. It's only a recommendation that goes then back to the province. So council has a couple options. You can obviously, in general terms, support an application. You can deny an application, or there's also a provision under this scheme where you can simply provide no comment. At that point, the province has to then conduct some sort of public consultation process to gather input and for themselves to feel comfortable that they've satisfied the requirements. In this case, the application's been made. It's reviewed by our staff, which includes discussions with the applicant and the RCMP to evaluate, again, what the province has asked us to, which is the impact on the community. We do a survey out to neighboring property owners. We try to gather that input. Through that review, what's come out of this is a series of recommendations that have been referred to this evening as terms and conditions, which they start on page 72 of your agenda. And you'll note here, these are actually terms and conditions that were not drafted by the city or the RCMP. These are actually terms and conditions that were put together by the province themselves through their licensing branch. And they are applied to some licenses already within the downtown core. The recommendation from the RCMP in this case is primarily to do with, and as the speakers mentioned, is the participation in Bar Watch is primarily voluntary participation at this time. And there's great participation from many of the liquor license operators in the downtown core. The concern from the RCMP is because it's voluntary, when the license changes hands, there's no guarantee that commitment will go to the next operator. So our recommendation is to make sure that it's attached to the license and therefore it would transfer regardless of the future ownership of that license.
So, Your Worship, I also wanted to provide a comment that we're certainly not trying to pick on Mr. Manhas and his establishments. This is something that's been applied, as Mr. Lindsay said, to other establishments in the downtown. And that we're not disputing also the delegation's comments about the impact this has on the value of their license and the operations. I recognize fully that this has an impact, and this is onerous for the owners and likely has an impact on how they carry out their business. And that's really up to council to establish and to provide the province with how you believe these establishments should be regulated in your community in terms of the level of scrutiny that you want to ensure the public has in terms of safety for all patrons of these facilities, and the responsibility that you're transferring to the owners of the establishments to play their role in ensuring that these are safe and enjoyed by all who are able to use them.
Thank you. Councillor Fuller.
Yeah, I was just looking on page 67, it talks about the terms and conditions. And the first sentence, as part of a province-wide program, the LCB is requesting liquor primary license holders agree to a set of terms and conditions, attachment C, which would be attached to the liquor license. So it looks like this is the way the Liquor Control Licensing Board is going. So anybody applying for a new liquor primary license or anything would have to have these attached to them, and they're trying to get them attached to some of the existing facilities or bars or nightclubs that don't have them. So it looks like this is provincial. It's what the province wants, and I was hearing that this wasn't from the province. And I look at the terms and conditions and I see the pretty British Columbia side. So I'm thinking, well, this is coming from the province of British Columbia. So anyway.
So Mr. Beaubier, thank you very much, but we've already received you. So we would need a motion from council to invite Mr. Beaubier back to the okay.
A second for a quick discussion.
Certainly.
Your Worship, I was going to suggest, with utmost respect to the staff's good work and also the applicants to our 27 seats, seems like there's the energy I'm feeling is maybe the conversation should be had amongst themselves, because we could go back and forth quite often this evening. I'm not saying not to have the conversation, but I think but I do not want to stall 27 seats over maybe it could be some simple fixes. And I'm totally in support of the application of 27 seats. I just want to make sure it works for the safety of the citizens, but also works for the owner. And I think there's space in there for a conversation. And like Mr. Swaby stated, they heard some information that maybe warranted a conversation. So I just want to have that comment. I know we're in the middle of a motion. Thank you.
Sure. So we've got a motion on the floor to permit the speaker to come back to the podium. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Please.
Thank you, Councillor. I really don't have much more to add to what I've already said, except to clarify. I spoke to the general manager with respect to these terms and conditions, and I was told that they are not coming from the province, that this is viewed as a local application and consideration. So these are not terms and conditions that are coming from the province or initiated by them. She was quite clear on that, and so I mean, maybe our information is different, but that's you may have got your information from Mr. J. Blackwell. But he had some conversations, not with me personally on that. I spoke to the general manager and I got different information on that. So it's not coming. And it doesn't make sense in the terms of the overall scheme of the liquor primary license, how they deal with these things, to go around and pick individual, not just Mr. Manhouse, pick him off. It's a general situation where when the opportunity presents itself, these terms and conditions are placed in front of the person who wants to vary or obtain a license, and that's not the way to do it. So to sum up, the only point I really did want to make was my information is different than is coming from staff with respect to where this is coming from. My information is not coming from the province. Thank you.
So don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere. Of the four speakers, anyone questions for the delegation? Go ahead, Councillor Kipp.
Well, you understand that we were having problems in the downtown core previously, and some of the reasons for bar watch and that to stop the violence, gang behavior. You do understand that it's been much improved because of this process.
Correct.
And are you aware that our attachment C is a British Columbia government document? The ones with the terms and condition comes from the BC government, although I don't see the stuff, but it's got the logo of the BC government on it. So.
Well, all I can tell you is that the conversation I had with Ms. Friesland was that this was not coming from their department, that it was a local initiative. Otherwise, you would have, if it were coming from the top, why isn't it in the terms and conditions with respect to all primary licenses?
Well, I would suggest they typically change and grow as time goes too.
Oh, well, that might be, but I suggest that's not, why would somebody do that? Why not just impose it from the top? And I'm suggesting that the reason they don't do it from the top is because they couldn't get it through the review process at the legislative branch. And so therefore, to do it this way is, I think, improper and it could lead to mischief, quite frankly. Thank you.
Any other people for the delegation? Speakers for the delegation? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Move receipt of the delegation. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. So, Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I appreciate the delegation's comments. If this was simply a case of approving the expanded seating capacity, I would have no problem supporting that, as Councillor Yoakum has also stated. However, I do have a problem supporting it without the condition of having those terms and conditions agreed to. We have a responsibility to our community. I think we have a responsibility to support the RCMP and their work against crime and especially possible gang infiltration, and it's out there. I think anything that we can do to give teeth to the RCMP, we should certainly proceed in that direction. So I appreciate the fact that Mr. Manhouse, I'm sure, has been a good corporate citizen. We've heard that he is already complying with much of the bar watch criteria. I don't understand why this terms and condition should not go with the liquor license, and that's what I would like to see happen. So I would not support the expansion without that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Yoakum.
Thank you, Your Worship. In regards to the terms and conditions of other establishments, this is to the staff most likely, is do we have a standard template? And I totally concur with Councillor Thorpe. We do have terms and conditions, and I just want to make sure we're being fair. I want to make sure is it too extreme from the previous terms and conditions? I'm not sure because I don't know what the other ones are. So I just want to see if we get a standard terms and conditions for not just this establishment, but all the establishments that will be requesting as such. So just wanted to put that out there, a question to the staff. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Fuller, are you still on?
I'm still on.
Okay.
Yeah, we could pass or not pass this tonight, but I would prefer to make a motion to refer it back to staff because, I look at the paragraph on terms and conditions. I see the provincial logo. I hear the person saying that that's not the way it is, so I would like to make a motion to refer this back to staff.
So, do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Kipp. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. What's that? Yeah. Thank you. Next item. Development permit DP 921 at 3280 Crystal Place and 3680 Howden Drive. There's a staff recommendation on page 86. Do I have a mover for the recommendation to get it on the floor? Moved by Councillor Pratt. Seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Discussion. Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next item. Development permit DVP, Development Variance Permit, pardon me, DVP 258 at 6283 Icarus Drive. It's requested the council hear anybody wishing to speak with respect to DVP 258. That's 6283 Icarus Drive. Seeing none, can we have a mover for the motion, please? I think Councillor Fuller was there by a split second. Councillor Fuller, seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Any questions? Being none, all those call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Next one is a rezoning application at number RA 347 at 5030 Hammond Bay Road. There's staff recommendation on page 99. It's in two parts. We can take it. Sorry, Adam. Mr. Swaby.
Your Worship, I just wanted to back up to the last application to be clear for council the direction. We need some direction, not just to receive the report.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
Motion to vary the setback. That's what you require. So moved.
Okay. Seconded? No questions. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. So, RA 347 at 5030 Hammond Bay Road. Do I have a mover? Councillor Yoakum. Seconder by Councillor Kipp. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Now we have to move the bylaw. Do I have a mover for first reading of the bylaw? Councillor Pratt. Thank you. Councillor Kipp. Any questions? Seeing none, call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Move the pass second reading bylaw 2015 under 4500.077. Pass second reading.
Second reading. Seconded by Councillor Yoakum. Seeing no questions, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next one, unresolved building deficiencies. It's notice on title, section 57 for 2137 Duggan Road. Staff recommendation, the council by resolution instruct the corporate officer to file a bylaw contravention notice respecting 2137 Duggan Road at the Land Title Survey Authority of British Columbia under section 57. It's requested that council hear anyone wishing to speak with respect to unresolved building deficiencies at 2137 Duggan Road. Is there anyone wishing to speak to that? Seeing none, can we have a mover, please, for the motion?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Council by resolution instruct the corporate officer to file a bylaw contravention notice respecting 2137 Duggan Road at the Land Title and Survey Authority of British Columbia under section 57 of the Community Charter.
Okay, questions? Seeing none, I call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Appointment of bylaw officer. There's a motion on page 107. Can I have a mover, please?
So moved.
Councillor Thorpe, seconded by Councillor Pratt. Thank you. Councillor Kipp.
Thank you. Through to staff, are these new or replacement positions?
Replacement due to retirement.
Okay, and relating to the next one too, this is very specific. And I notice the next one, this is about licensing permit clerk, and the other one is, do they go back and forth, or would this be in a separate section from the next bylaw officer?
A separate section, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. You have a mover and seconder on those? Thank you.
I'd like one more question.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor.
Further to that, how many tickets in 1 year or court or reviews would someone like this handle? How many tickets do we issue in a year for these people?
Certainly confirm that for you, but I don't have the number with me.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Appointment of a bylaw enforcement officer. That's the next one. Ms. Cheryl Colombo. So moved. Seconded by Councillor Pratt. Discussion. Seeing that, Councillor Fuller.
I guess it would be the same question as Councillor Kipp asked. Is this a new position or replacement of an old position?
No, certainly there's no new positions at this time with the animal control contract, so it's a replacement position.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Your Worship, further to that, and I hope we would remember this as staff, and we will consciously try to, is that you have a motion not to change the service levels until the court review is done.
Thank you. Councillor Hong.
Thank you, Your Worship, through the staff. Licensing and control of animals, bylaws, and parks and recreation. Is this job 2 departments?
Excuse me. This is a contract with the Animal Control Service, and they do provide service both in our parks and for animal control, so that's why both are listed.
So is this a city employee or is this a contract employee?
It's a contract position for the animal control contract, which will be before you fairly shortly here for your adjudication.
Okay.
Your Worship, because they enforce our bylaws, we have to appoint them as our bylaw officers.
Oh, okay. That was actually a question. Didn't know this position existed. So, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further speakers, call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next one, property maintenance bylaw number 1990, number 3704. There are 4 addresses that council pursuant to property maintenance bylaw 1990-3704 direct the owners of the following premises to remove the materials as listed below from the premises within 14 days, or the work will be done by the city or its agents at the owner's cost. The first one being 2004 Lakeside Drive. Is there anyone wishing to speak with respect to property maintenance of the property at 2004 Lakeside Drive? Seeing none. Next is 555 Milton Street. Is there anyone that wishes to speak to 555 Milton Street? Seeing none. Anyone wishing to speak to 96 Princess Street? Anyone wishing to speak to 96 Princess? Seeing none. 2612 Labio Road. Anyone wishing to speak to 2612 Labio Road? Seeing none. Can we have a mover and a seconder for the motion, please? Moved by Councillor Pratt and seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Any speakers? Seeing none, I call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Number 10, bylaws. First one, we need a motion on concerning commercial vehicle licensing regulation, that it be adopted. Can we have a mover, please? Need a mover? Oh, pardon me, Councillor Hong, seconder? Councillor Thorpe, thank you very much. And speaker, Councillor Kipp.
Thank you. I guess for me, one of my only concerns with increasing the fines and that for commercial vehicles and the tags that they have to display, it's just the logistics of commercial deliveries is always tough in our downtown core or a lot of places in town. And I just hope we don't impede the fact that we're delivering things all the time. And as I've heard, some of the delivery guys are kind of lazy, don't want to push their cart too far in that, but it's an advantage to be able to have our logistics run smoothly for all of our supplies, and I just hope we don't interfere with it as much as help to get the logistics supplies to our downtown core. So, just
Councillor Hong.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to the staff. Just a clarification, fail to display licensed decal. Those are for people that park in the commercial loading zone. Is that it? So if a passenger car parked there, the fine would be $50?
fine for that circumstance, but the whole intent here is to revise the fee schedule to be consistent with the remainder of our bylaws. And in all cases, the bylaw officers are certainly looking to seek voluntary compliance and only enforcement if necessary.
Your Worship, I would read it as it's a $200 fine if you're not authorized to be in that area.
What?
Thank you.
If you're not, because I'm reading it as $50 if you're not displaying your proper permit, and if you don't have the right decal, then you get a $200 fine.
Are you finished? Councillor Hall?
Yeah, I think so. I've gotten a
Looked like
ticket.
you want to ask
Well,
another
I've
question.
gotten a ticket for parked in a commercial, and I think it was like $26. That's because that was. I just can't remember what this fine was for. I'm just a little confused.
Your
Okay.
Worship, we'll follow up on that one.
Yeah, I'm just a little. It's like now it's $200 now as opposed to 26. That.
Well, you owe another
Oh, so that's how it works.
Commercial.
Very good.
Your Worship, we'll clarify that for you. I understand the issue. We'll clarify it for council.
Thank you.
Okay. So it's been moved and seconded. Can we call the question? Oh, pardon me, Councillor Fuller. Pardon me.
Yeah, I read it slightly different than Mr. Swaby. Failure to display a licensed decal is a $50 fine. Displaying of an unauthorized decal is a $200 fine. So if you're displaying a decal that isn't right, then you're going to get fined $200. If you don't display a decal, you get fined $50. So if you're going to take your chances, don't display a decal at all.
Oh my goodness.
That's why I have to follow.
Thank you. So I call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, so I would suggest if you don't have a hard hat, you might want to put one on for this next one, because I'm told that there's going to be all kinds of things dropping from the ceiling and ticker tape and all kinds of fireworks going off. Can we have a motion that the financial plan 2015-7206 to confirm and adopt the financial plan be adopted? Seconded by Councillor Fuller.
Can we make a...
Oh, come on. It's adopted. We can certainly... Yeah, okay. Councillor Hong.
Thank you, Your
Don't rain
Worship.
on anybody's parade.
I
here
won't
now.
rain any. I will reluctantly approve this just so we can move on, because I know we're dragging on, but I'm determined to work harder next year. Just to let everybody know. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp.
I'm actually going to vote in favor of this budget, which I really don't always like doing. It's because of Mr. Clemens' 28 years, and I think if of 20 of I've been here, I've hardly voted for any of his budgets. So I'm voting for his budget this time.
Oh my God, you're going to make him want to stay.
No, you wouldn't do that.
Councillor Yoakum.
Yes, I am well aware we discussed this for many hours over in the other building, etc. But I do look forward to getting to work on the next year's budget, etc. And also for 2017, that 4.6% still lingers with me. So I look forward to getting to work for the future years. Thank you.
Certainly. Seeing no further speakers, I call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
So, Your Worship...
There's no noise, there's no ticker tape, there's no nothing. What's going on here?
Just said, given that this is Mr. Clemens' last budget and potentially his last council meeting of his career as an employee, I'd like to thank him and join me in thanking him for his 27 years of dedicated public service. Marvelous employee.
Finally. Thank you.
Oh, it's not the budget.
27 years. Thank you. Almost 28 years. Thank you very, very much. Next item. The tax rates bylaw, 2015, number 7210, to fix the tax rates upon real property in the city of Nanaimo and to provide for the payment of taxes for the year 2015 be adopted. Can we have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Thorpe, seconded by Councillor Pratt. Any questions? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next item, that road closure and dedication removal for a portion of Albion Street adjacent to 456 Bruce Avenue, bylaw number 2015-7211, to provide for highway closure and dedication removal past third reading. Can we have a mover, please? Councillor Fuller, seconded by Councillor Yocum. Thank you. Any speakers? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Next item.
Move receipt of the correspondence?
Move receipt of the correspondence. Certainly. Seconded? Thank you. And what are those folks doing here? Any business, so we need to receive the correspondence. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
I'd like to speak to it.
Okay, so now business arising from the correspondence.
I'd like to
Councillor
send this back to staff for a report on an emergency connection. I know we do have, we have one that was put to Lanceville many years ago in the event of disaster, and I think we should send it back to staff for a report on the possibilities of connection. And do we want to throw in that we'll take Cedar in, amalgamate them if they want the connection? Do we throw that in or not? No, okay, I'll just leave it to the report on the water.
So, that being said, motion on the floor. You want to
A motion to send this
Motion
to
to,
staff
yep.
for a report on the emergency connection.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Councillor Hong, thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing no one, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. No council appointments, no motion, and any notice of motion? No. Any other business? Next item, question period. Good evening, sir.
Red Taylor, 204 Emery Way. How much money do we make out of selling and handling commercial vehicle decals? Because I believe the money all belongs to the Union of British Columbia Municipalities. So do we deduct, or can we deduct cost of issuing those licenses? How does it work that it's no cost to the city before we forward the funds from selling those stickers?
Can we, and can anyone answer that question? I see Mr. Clemens coming down.
You're not going to talk for me the last time.
Exactly how much money we make, but we do turn the money over to the Union of BC municipalities, but they pay money back to the different municipalities in proportion to their participation in the program. I think that the amount of money the city makes is somewhere in the rough area of about $25,000 a year.
And does the fine money go to them as well?
The fines are the city's revenues
Fine
because
money
we write
belongs
the
to the
fines
city.
under our bylaws, so they stay with the city of Nanaimo.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. All those in favor? Thank you.